Recording. Which camera? Make sure nobody gets nauseous. Probably will. Okay. All right. How's the frame?
Good. You've got quite a bit of space above your head, but. And how about mine? Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, your framing was perfect. You're good.
Okay. Yeah, I do quite a few webinars, so.
Yeah, I have to move mine every time. All right, good morning, wherever you happen to be. Welcome to Healthology. This will be the second episode now. It's a practical perspective on natural living. I'm Portia, and today we will be talking to a homeopath, Donna Powers. Donna, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, Portia. I'm so happy to be here with you today. I am what's considered a classical homeopath. That's what I trained in 4 years. And I came to it later in life simply because I had a child who really needed some help. I went to a naturopath, and it was costly for us at the time. We had 2 children with a lot of needs, and we were desperate. So the diet worked, the supplements worked, some homeopathy worked, but I just couldn't keep it up anymore. And that was when my mom discovered a homeopath in Winnipeg, which was a journey for us. And we went to see her, and I thought, whatever this medicine is, this is what I want to know and learn about. So a very difficult situation. It was a urinary problem with my son. We had conventional, invasive medical tests done, and the bottom line was there's nothing wrong with your child. And that's very hard for a mom to hear when you have a child going to bed at night, resting, relaxing, and then punching himself in the genitals because he has to get up and go pee one more time. But there was nothing in his bladder. So technically they were right. There was nothing physiologically wrong, but this child had an urge to pee every time he laid down. Ours was one of those miracles that you hear about with homeopathy, and it was one remedy overnight, and that problem was gone. And that's when I bought my own little book, and I started using homeopathy for acute illnesses for our children and my husband. And then about a year later, I started to study formally. So that's me. That's how I got into homeopathy. And now my passion is sharing with other parents how you can use homeopathy safely and successfully, have a homeopathic kit in your home, and be able to handle the acute illnesses. Those are the ones that have a beginning and a middle and an end. You will need to see a homeopath if it's a chronic condition. And you can be helped with that as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would expect somebody, if it's a chronic condition, that's always something more complex underlying it, which is hard for somebody at home to figure out without that formal training involved.
Right, exactly. So it would be something like, so for some examples, eczema. Eczema is not a condition that you could probably, I'll just read my little book. There are lots of articles. I mean, Google's wonderful now. You can do all kinds of searches, but it's likely you'll have more success with the homeopath. Allergies, that's another one. Asthma is a chronic condition. Constipation or chronic diarrhea. These are typically chronic conditions that get set up, and there's a lot of inflammation going on, and your homeopath. The younger the children are too, the more success you're likely to have. And as we get older and it's more chronic, then it becomes challenging. I'm trying to think of what other chronic conditions.
Sorry, the child's very energetic today.
Yes, we've just come out of a full moon. That can happen.
Okay, go ahead. Shaking my pillow. You were talking about some of your experiences that brought you to your current profession. Is there other, do you want to go into more detail or just sort of keep moving forward?
Well, I think what really stunned me when I was doing the do-it-yourself, buy the book, it was Dana Allman's Everybody's Guide to Homeopathic Medicine. And, my husband would get a cold and we got him through that. And then I was reading, I thought, because I would go directly to coughs, colds, or sore throats, or constipation or sometimes diarrhea. He does have those sections in there. But then I thought, well, I better go back and read the beginning of the book. And as I was reading it, I looked up and I said to my husband, you know what? Homeopathic remedies are diluted. And he said, well, that doesn't make sense. I said, yeah, I mean, so I had to read and reread the homeopathic pharmaceutical process, and they are diluted. And so I thought, how could that possibly be? Because I had studied herbals as a young woman when I first came to Calgary. And here it was that it was explaining the idea of taking a substance, putting it with milk sugar, and you grind it, or you dilute it in alcohol, and then you shake it, and then something changes. And that was my first insight into this is about energy. It's energetic medicine. It's in a physical form. And the more dilute it is, the more potent it works, and the deeper it works on all levels. So the physical, the emotional, and then the mental. And this was an eye-opener for me. And then the other part that was very, very helpful was that I started to understand that this is about supporting the body to self-heal. We are already geared to self-heal. When we have symptoms, when we have symptoms, it's just this invisible vitality that organizes our whole body that is communicating to us outwardly, something's out of whack. And the best that the vital force that vital force can do is to create a symptom. And then when you support that vital force, giving it a gentle nudge, then everything resolves itself. It's quite beautiful, actually. And that was the first time that things made sense to me in terms of healing, even though I had studied herbs and was, learning so much about what we could use as an alternative to over-the-counter medications. But you have to know, I come from the generation where fever was to be feared. I did the Tylenol. I did the children's Tylenol. Many regrets about that. But now I know differently. And when you know differently, you do better. I think that's the phrase, when you know better, you do better. So that's one of my other big things that I help parents learn is about fever and how not to fear it and how you can work naturally with the body's whole immune system. Fever is so elegant. It's unbelievable, really.
I remember having to explain it to a friend's daughter. She wanted to know, why do we have fevers? And I'm like, how do I simplify this? I'm like, oh, you know what? It's basically to deliberately cook the disease to death. That's pretty much the core function.
Yes, well, that's one of the functions. And then the other function is so it creates an environment that is too warm for these, because what we're responding to, it's not the bacteria or the virus that is making us sick. It's our immune system's response that is creating symptoms. And so it's creating, yes, a too warm environment. It's really heating things up. But the other thing it's doing is engaging another facet of the immune system that is very elegant. It communicates efficiently. What is challenging for everybody, including the medical system, is that the cost for energetically for creating a fever is very, very high. Mm-hmm. And this is why everybody goes, the fever's too high, the fever's too high. But in fact, the body actually has a built-in set point, and it will never go beyond that except in two occasions. One will be sunstroke. The body can't self-regulate anymore, and poisoning. Those are the only two times. So even when we get up to a 104 point whatever, yes, it's getting high. The beauty of homeopathy is that you can support that fever and you can manage it. So it's not that it suppresses the fever, but it supports that self-healing aspect of the immune system. And then you get the sweat. And then you actually get, as part of the bonus of this immune system fever response, self-made antibiotics. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I love learning about how the immune system works and everything, because it's like once I understood it, it was like, you know what, I'm not scared of my kid being sick anymore. It's like, it's going to happen. I have a an idea of when I really do need to be concerned, like bacterial meningitis. I'm sorry, I'm going to run straight for the antibiotics on that one.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's an appropriate place for it. When I teach my parents, it's blood, brain, bones, breath, eye injury. Nobody better than conventional medicine, emergency medicine. That's where you go.
Absolutely.
Good to have both.
Yeah, they can work together. It's just everything is so new with our conventional, like modern medicine, and then traditional medicine, or natural, whatever terminology you want to use. They're both fairly new, although using the herbs and whatnot isn't new. It's adapting to more modern modalities because we can get more detailed and therefore more targeted. I mean, we're not going to go into with the man-made chemicals because that makes the need for diagnostics to target things more specifically far more important. You can't just go off of symptoms with the herbs. You can with, if I understand correctly, with the homeopathy, just not with herbs, because you have to be much more targeted to get the right result for the herb. So I think like the diagnostics and the modern medicine for broken bones, and obviously antibiotics where they're needed and whatnot, is so important, but we overuse them. And I think it's possible that with more effort on both sides that everything can integrate and create a beautiful result.
Exactly.
But it's going to take some work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what would you say is a common misconception about what people think you do?
Well, because you brought up herbs, one of the things that is often common is that what we do is herbs, that you give people herbs. Herbology is a whole art and science of its own. And much of the information that comes to homeopathy does have its roots, pun, in botanicals. Hahnemann, 250 years ago, left medicine. He was a conventionally trained medical doctor in his day, over 200 years ago, but he couldn't live with the bloodletting, the poisoning with mercury and gold for syphilis and those kinds of diseases. You were poisoned before you were cured, and that is not too dissimilar to some situations now. And so with the herbs, Hahnemann started translating botanical texts. And how he hit on the idea of homeopathy came from a simple little experiment he did. He was reading and translating that China or cinchona bark, Jesuit's bark is the other name, cured malaria because it was a bitter herb, and that was the most unscientific thing he had heard of. So he, in fact, took a tincture, which would be the equivalent of a herbal tincture of China bark, cinchona, and what he found was as he got diarrhea, he got the sweats, he got vomiting, he got malaria-like symptoms. He knew he didn't get malaria from drinking Jesuit bark tree. So from that, he discerned that it cures malaria because it can create malaria-like symptoms. Then he started experimenting with these dilutions that I mentioned before. And what he found was when he diluted it to a certain point, it wasn't helpful. And that was when he hit on the grinding and the shaking, the trituration and succussion. And he found that some kind of substance was released. He didn't have the electron microscope. He did not have quantum energy. He just realized something was released. So then he said that this is homeopathy, like curing like. And then that was at the point where it separated. So herbals are only part of what he experimented with. He experimented with the other drugs of his day, gold, mercury, arsenic. These were poisons, and he was able to make them safe. So we're not herbologists, although we have our roots in botany. We're also not naturopaths. Some naturopaths are homeopaths, but because I've been trained as a homeopath, I don't particularly do supplements or vitamins, nutritional advice, detoxing, although more and more homeopaths are being called into that simply because some children are so environmentally overloaded with toxins that we've had to learn how to do that. And there's some very famous homeopaths who are doing that, particularly for children who are diagnosed on the spectrum now. We have a huge number of them. So we're not naturopaths, but some naturopaths are trained to be homeopaths as well. I think you've got somebody entertaining you today.
Oh yeah, my phone is flipped around to do the recording with a better quality camera. So my child is currently staring at your face while you talk. It's like, there's somebody on the back.
Oh, that's funny. That's very funny. Those are the biggest ones. The herbs, homeopathy, naturopathy. So those are the biggest misconceptions. The other big misconception, Portia, is that there's an argument being presented by skeptics that somehow homeopathy is only placebo. It's these milk sugar granules, which in and of itself is a pretty amazing concept, placebo effect. They know about it even with prescription medications. But at the same time, they want to ban it, particularly in the US. The FDA is really hammering down now on homeopathic pharmacies. And part of it is they want to say that it is poison.
It's a placebo, but it works. What?
Yes. So you can't have it both ways. And then the other way, we also know that homeopathy really does work. Pre-verbal, non-verbal, whether they're children, babies, adults in nursing homes, or animals. Homeopathy works. You see it work, and it's quite a marvel, actually, when you get the right remedy. Like herbals that you have to individualize. Again, homeopathy, you do have to individualize, and it can be incredibly disappointing if you have bought your book for your do-it-yourself at home, and you're trying different remedies and nothing is helping. So it's important to understand it's slow medicine as well. It can be instant like it was my son's overnight, but lots of times it's just to support the body to help heal itself. And that sometimes takes 2 or 3 days of being at home and recovering.
Yeah. I remember years ago while I was writing my book, I stumbled across this study, and it was done by an engineer. He was curious about whether or not there was anything actually going on with homeopathy. So this is way out of his field, but he has the right training to see if he can make a quantum imprint on water. And I won't go into detail because honestly, it's been too long since I've read it, but I'll try to grab it and put it into the description box below. But he found that even though he couldn't pinpoint exactly what was happening, the water had changed after he put the imprint on it. So something he could confirm was going on with homeopathy. So it's not somebody working with confirmation bias, because it wasn't even related to anything he did. I would assume that the author's spouse was into homeopathy, and they're like, well, I don't know, and went to go do a study, because why not? It's published or done nowadays.
Yeah. Yes, and there are other big names. Emoto is the Japanese man who was able to show, again, through electron microscope, how energy can be transmitted and form crystals. There's another gentleman, Benveniste, and he, again, is not a homeopath, but he is in the world of science. Montagnier is another name. And in Stuttgart, Germany, there's another person who has done electron microscope work, and he shows the flower being immersed in water and then taken these photos, and the imprint is exactly the same in every single one. And then what he did was take a different plant to see what the imprint would be on the water, and it's different. It's unique to that individual. So there's more and more work being done, for sure. And it's an exciting time, really. And maybe homeopathy will explain quantum physics.
Yeah, maybe.
Just a thought, one that was shared with me years ago by another homeopath.
Now, if you were, let's say you had to go to another professional in your field and to seek help, what would be some red flags that would point you away from them?
Red flags would be their qualifications first. I would be looking for somebody who had at least 4 years study or had been certified by a board that is recognized internationally or nationally. In the US, we have the North American Society of Homeopaths, NASH, and it has affiliations with the UK. And you get your RS Hom, whether North America or just RS Hom, which is for the UK. There is another one, the Council for Homeopathic Certification. So you look for these kinds of designations. There are websites. One of the ones you can go to find out what the designations mean is the National Center for Homeopathy. They have been a layperson's support and information source for a very long time, especially in the US. I'm hoping to be creating something like that through the work that I do through my online educational courses and my new website, so that you know exactly what you're getting into. Right now, a medical doctor could probably take a weekend course in homeopathy and put their sign out saying they're a homeopath. I would be a bit hesitant about that. That would be kind of a red flag for me.
Mm-hmm.
A red flag would be the amount of time they spend on a consult. Some Indian homeopaths see thousands of people in a day and a week. They are very efficient with seeing remedy pictures. So, you know, even if they give you 15, 20 minutes, a half hour, it might be worthwhile. But if you contact somebody here in North America and they're charging you an initial consult and spending maybe 45 minutes, that would be kind of a red flag for me. Typically, I spend an hour and a half to 2 hours the first time I see somebody. You want to also make sure it's a good fit for you. So it really is okay to say, can I phone you and have a 10-minute meet and greet? And what are your principles? You want to feel comfortable. In a homeopathic interview, you're really talking about not just your physical complaints, but how it's related to your emotions and your whole mental state. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So those would be, you want somebody who's going to spend time with you. Mm-hmm. Availability. If they're unavailable to you in emergencies. So somebody with small children will need a homeopath who is available for acute illnesses or support. When I teach my online courses, we create private Facebook groups so that if you are dealing with an acute, you can ask for help, and I supervise everything there. That's different than a lot of other homeopaths. Mm-hmm. Some belong to a collective, and you know you can get hold of somebody on the weekend if you need to. Mm-hmm. You really have to. The National Center for Homeopathy, again, has what to look for when looking for a homeopath. Mm-hmm. Those are good things to read. Cost is going to be part of it too.
Yeah. But do you have any sort of special stories that stand out from your experience as a homeopath? Maybe funny or heartwarming?
Well, I've got one that's a very funny one. Our homeopathic remedies have scientific names on them. There's a remedy that we use sometimes for urinary infections, acute ones, or used for stings and bites, and it's called Apis. And Apis is the scientific word for bee. The full name is Apis mellifica. And this one colleague of mine had written out on paper, and it said, if you get an acute condition, you can take Apis. Well, when this person read it, they read Apis. And then finally phoned, quite desperate, you know, I've been taking a piss every time and it's not helping. And then they figured out what the problem was. It wasn't actually, of course, a physical urination, which can happen already with urinary complaints. So that's the funny story. And then for something completely different, one of the tender stories that I have is my sister and her husband's aging dog. He was just a beloved golden retriever, Elliot, and he developed pancreatitis. They took him to the vet, and any itis is simply an inflammation, so there's nothing they can do. They knew the pancreas was damaged. One of his symptoms was this saliva that hung from his mouth. And, you know, it would just even sway in the breeze. So it was this thick, stringy. And I said to my mom, well, why don't you just try Iris versicolor, which is actually your iris that you find in the garden, but in a homeopathic preparation. Gave it to him, and he lived another 2 years. Aww. Yeah. So, yeah, that was very special for them. And it's dramatic when you get that right remedy, when those symptoms speak to you so clearly and you match it with the right remedy, the results are quite spectacular.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool seeing when we can help our pets, because sometimes some animals are very easy to treat. I know I've got pet rats and I've treated dogs. They're fairly easy to treat with herbs because they've followed us around so much. There's a lot of overlap.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I actually have a female rat that got dumped on me and she was housed with her brother. Now, normally that would mean I should have like 15 brand new rats, but I give my rats aromatic herbs like sage and mugwort and whatnot because they just love it and it's good for them. But having all males, I wasn't remembering that mugwort is an emmenagogue, or it encourages menstruation, so it'll purge a pregnancy. And she eats it. She hasn't had any babies, which is good because at her age it would have killed her. But and same thing, I add turmeric to their food, and that does the same thing. Only it's a galactagogue, so it increases milk production. And again, that'll affect pregnancy. So she hasn't had any pups way too early, which is good, but it was a bit of an accident. But it shows the amount of overlap that can happen. And dogs aren't quite as much, and cats are some of the hardest. So knowing that something like homeopathy can safely be used for them is a big relief for a lot of pet owners, I think. Because it can be so tough when the vet tells you, nothing I can do, I'm sorry.
Right. Yeah, and then you have to consider euthanizing, and that's sad. I've quit having my cats. It's too hard on me when they go. I just get in the bathtub and I cry and cry and cry, and then I promise myself I'm not going to have another animal. But we loved having animals when the children were small. I think that's important. It was important for me as a child to have my dog and my cat. Yeah.
Do you have any website or social media accounts people can follow your work on?
Yes, my main site is powersofhomeopathy.com, which is a nice little play on my name. I registered it years ago. And right now we're switching it over. You can find lots of resources now, but I'm really moving into online education, teleseminars, webinars, where you can learn how to use a homeopathic kit. So that's my big mission, a homeopathic kit in every home to know how to use it. And that's my biggest resource. So watch for new courses. I also like to promote all these online summits are amazing. You can just get tremendous information. So there's one coming up, the Oral Health Summit, and I've contributed courses before. And they asked, do you have anything for dentistry? It's like, oh my gosh, yeah, homeopathy is wonderful for pregnancy. It's safe to have remedies then, breastfeeding, kids and babies that are teething, and then all the way into adults and even cancer. So I'm creating a course especially for that. So those are the main resources. Facebook, Powers of Homeopathy. And I am on Twitter as Donna L. Powers. And I repost and post there as well from time to time. I do have a magazine as well, and it's undergoing some changes. First, I'm focusing on the courses, and then we'll be revamping the magazine to make it easier, I think, for parents to use. My ambition was this Homeopathy First magazine, so use homeopathy first. And it's too much. It's like reading a journal, and I realized parents today just need information pretty fast. So we're going to revamp it and tie it in with the courses so that there might be an issue on colds and coughs, but it will be smaller, faster. You can access the remedies, or I'll focus on just the remedies. That's my other big course right now, is just the remedies. So you're learning a new one. At the end of 40 weeks, you will know 40 homeopathic remedies and be able to. I had one parent say one time, I can hardly wait for my kids to be sick. So I thought, okay, good for you.
Yay, toys!
Yeah. Yes, and she's been quite successful. Actually, that parent went on to study homeopathy, and she's a brilliant homeopath. She's opening up a clinic in Red Deer in Alberta. Yeah. You just never know where this will take you, these passions.
Yeah. Anything can be monetized at some point, and without compromising yourself either.
Yes, and yes, that's a good point for you. My big mission as well is to make homeopathy affordable and accessible. It's one of
Mm-hmm.
those complementary alternative medicines that is most often not covered by private healthcare insurance or even in Canada in our public health insurance. Although Blue Cross, we just found out, is covering homeopathy now, which is a real boon for some
Wow.
families. It's not a lot, but it's a beginning that insurance companies may be recognizing. So yeah, all my courses, yeah, I'm willing to negotiate on prices, and I've kept the prices. I've dropped everything by half from what I usually do. And that is more from my heart. I've had coaches all along saying, oh, you can't do that. Oh, no, that's, got to charge what it's worth. And I thought, no, I need to get this information out.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I guess we'll just wrap up before somebody loses their patience, because they're very eagerly, constantly demanding my attention from the couch.
Yes, done well. And I'll be grandma this afternoon with a child who can't go to a babysitter because of rash all over the body. We just don't know what it is we're dealing with yet. So grandma's going to get her homeopathic detective hat out, and we'll see what we can do. So
Okay.
yes, children need us.
Yes. You have a wonderful day, Donna.
Yeah, you too, Portia. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.